So we will start with Andrzej Kowarik, member of European Parliament from Econ Committee, also rapporteur on digital finance issues. Please, Andrzej, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, Dr. Boni. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation and for organizing this event. I think it's actually a very topical issue that we are discussing today, the connection between the SMEs, their business models, the business environment, but also development of digital financial infrastructure and digital financial services, which can, on one hand, be the core business of a company, or it can be something that enhance the functioning of an SME in the long term. And I think, as it was mentioned, we are living a very particular year, given the development and evolution of pandemic and its impact on the way the economy works and the business operators are actually working in general. And I think this is a good moment to discuss this issue a little bit more in detail and see even what can be done from our side, and discussing with the industry on the European level, so that actually there is a policy action that can help companies innovate and promote technologies in this area. As it was mentioned, the European Parliament has recently adopted its own report on digital financial services. I had the honor to work with my colleague Stefan Berger here on the report, and I think the outcome is very good, and it's actually a sort of a position of the European Parliament how we see the future policy action in this area, with obviously in parts of the report special emphasis put on the question of SMEs and how they should be approached. We actually dealt particularly with issues like crypto assets, but also how to handle and access and analyze data in this regard, because we feel that it was the I think the shared vision in the Parliament that the data is actually the key for the development of financial services in Europe. And last but not least, which I think is also very relevant for our discussion today, is operational resilience. So sort of a capacity of the system to face and actually deal with potential cyber threats. This is something which I feel is very important in this area. It is critical for the functioning, but sometimes for the SMEs, it is something that it's just maybe out of the scope of their business or beyond their capacities or competencies they have. And I think we should also here be able to provide appropriate legislative framework so that the financial infrastructure that the companies or the users or the consumers are using is actually reliable, secure enough, and is actually and has an adequate level of operational resilience vis-a-vis potential threats. I think we saw it with the discussion with the European Commission when they published the digital financial services package in the end of September. There was some data concerning the sharp increase of cyber threats and cyber attacks on financial infrastructure during the pandemic period. Especially, we have data from the spring and summer, and the increase was quite visible. And I think this is something that we need to address properly. And obviously, another link to the special pandemic situation is that there was a large number of companies that were actually switching to online services, not only in the way they were providing services or selling products, but also the way they are dealing with payments. They are dealing with either the B2B or the B2C relations regarding financial transactions. And due to this increase of let's say online payments and use of digital financial infrastructure, they became let's say much greater target for potential cyber threats. Also, given the fact that many of the companies didn't have extensive experience with those issues before, and had to actually sort of embrace new technologies. I think that's why we sort of had this aspect in mind, and we really welcome the Commission proposing a special dedicated regulation on digital operational resilience. I think it's a good way forward. We have to really see it how exactly the rules and the framework will be set in order not to overburden the companies, not to overburden the entire system, but also to allow for a number of safeguards, as I mentioned. And also I welcome the proposal from the European Commission on the digital payment strategy, or the retail payment strategy, as part of the digital financial services package, which I think is a very good step forward, because if we see something that the digital financial services, or let's say the online financial infrastructure in general, can actually help to overcome potential barriers on national markets and enhance the cross-border activities of SMEs and other companies across Europe, especially if we have a proper legislative framework. There is a proposal for instant payment framework, etc. So I think this is a very good contribution. And I'm really looking forward to also from the side of the European Parliament to discuss those issues in the future. Maybe two minor points at the end of my introduction. We also in the report discussed the so-called crypto assets, and I think we see a very particular trends regarding the potential introduction of digital currencies proposed by central banks. Let's say digital euro, and I think this is something that we also addressed in the report extensively. And if we discuss the future of SMEs dealing with the digital financial services, I think part of them already now using, for example, different payment tokens or utility tokens for providing their services. The possibility to, for example, adopt or switch to digital currencies issued by central banks, such as potential digital euro, can also enhance capacity for companies actually to innovate and be part of let's say the new business environment as this will develop and unfold. Obviously, this is not something to be dealt with, today or tomorrow, but in a short or midterm perspective, I think this is a sort of a development trend that the companies should follow. So to conclude, I'll be happy actually to discuss today on the panel different aspects of the payments and digital financial services with the link of SMEs. The SMEs have tremendous capacity to innovate and uptake new technologies very, very fast. I think we should do our utmost actually to promote and help them to do so. And as I said, I'll be happy to discuss these new trends and potential practical aspects of these new tendencies also with the industry and other relevant stakeholders. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for excellent presentation and also information about your report, your and Stephen Berger report from the European Parliament. I think it's a broad view on many issues related to digital payment, and it's good. You have touched key issues as operational resilience, and also how to use the data, and also how to make this solution, this approach much more available and accessible for small, medium businesses. It's crucial if we want to change the situation. So thank you very much, and we will continue. Now I want to give the floor to Jürgen Gobel from Ingenico Group. He is a business development director. Through many years, he was responsible, and he is responsible for card payment, and I think his knowledge, his experience will be very useful for our discussion. Jürgen, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Michal, for the introduction. So I think I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Yeah, thank you again for the introduction. and good morning to everybody. Thank you also for being invited to the SME Connect webinar on digital payments post-COVID-19. It's good to stay in contact in these difficult times. My name is Jürgen Göbel, and on the following slides, I will introduce the association IDZ and the German perspective with some real figures on card payment, and as well the results of surveys around this topic conducted by the association. I'm representing the association German Payment System Initiative, or Initiative Deutsche Zahlungssysteme. We are based in Berlin and established in 2005. The IDZ promotes the use of electronic payment schemes from the German Banking Industry Committee, so representing more or less all German banks. The IDZ represents the interests of 85 members. They are terminal manufacturers, software providers, vending machine operators, network operators, payment service providers, and credit institutions who offer products using a payment scheme of the German banking industry in their portfolio. The essential payment system or scheme is the girocard. And the girocard is the bank card of everybody who has a bank account in Germany. And the goal is to promote the girocard rather than the international payment schemes. So you probably know the credit card adoption in Germany is much less than in other countries. So the IDZ represents card present transactions. So e-commerce is not included in the today's work and not included in my presentation. Girocard is the most common payment system in Germany. There are more than 100 million cards issued, and the share is about 60% of all cashless payments. The left diagram shows a half-year to half-year comparison of the number of transactions, which grew by 20%. And as a comparison, in 2019, the number of transactions was 45 billion. And the growth of more than 20% came mainly through the food sector, but also drugstores, even so many shops and the hospitality area was closed during the lockdown. Of course, SMEs are using and accepting girocard more and more as well. The diagram on the right-hand side shows the growth of the related revenue. Girocard is accepted at more than 870,000 terminals, and 80% of all of them are contactless already. The number of POS terminals increases slowly but steadily. Less than 1 million terminals or acceptance points is not much for a country with the size of Germany in a European comparison. But there's only one device required per point of sale to accept any card. And card payment has been used at tier 1, tier 2 merchants and many SMBs already for years, but new SMBs are offering card payment as well. And during the COVID, many of the bakeries and budgets, all of them started to accept card payment for many reasons which are obvious. From the previous slide, you will have noticed that the total revenue grew less than the number of transactions. The reason is that the average amount decreased as well. So girocard is used more and more for everyday purchases. Also on the bottom, you see the comparison for the contactless girocard, which has not changed the card, which has not changed a lot. Of course, contactless is used more for low value payments, but also for higher amounts as well. Contactless girocard payments are on the rise. More than 50% of all the transactions are already contactless. Contactless bank cards with girocard scheme have been issued by the German banks since 2017. That was, of course, much later than in other countries like Eastern Europe or the UK. But approximately 80 million girocards will be contactless by the end of 2020. So more than 80% will be contactless. And most Sparkassen, Volksbanken, Raiffeisenbanken, and some private banks enable mobile payment with the digital girocard in Android smartphones already. And the Sparkassen have started with girocard and Apple Pay for the iPhone users from this summer. So that's, of course, also an important trend. What are the changes in the payment behavior in Germany? People have never paid less in cash than in 2020. The IDZ conducted a survey with the question, when you think back to your last purchases, how have you paid? How did you usually pay your purchases? In cash or by card or by smartphone? The result of the survey clearly shows the increase for cards and smartphones, and the decrease of cash, which is below 50% now. Figures from the EHI Retail Institute show the same. The forecast for 2020 is that cashless payment reaches 59% in the organized retail, and cash will decrease by 1 million transactions in a year-to-year comparison. So what are the effects of the Corona crisis on cashless payment in Germany? The question of this survey was, have you paid more with your card or smartphone because of the Corona crisis than before, or has nothing changed? The result is that on average, 39% pay more by card now. There's not much a dependency of the age of those surveyed, but younger people tend more to use their smartphone, which is at a level of 4% now. In another survey, the question was asked, due to the Corona crisis, have you paid more often than before in the last few weeks, or has nothing changed for you? Here, the result is that 44% confirmed to keep their payment behavior after the crisis. Of course, the question is, what is before, what is after the crisis? With the lockdown or soft lockdown we are in right now, of course, that trend will continue. So what is the European perspective? It's just some states and comments which are public, which you have seen probably. And in July 2020, the ECB confirmed to support the decision of 16 European banks to launch the European Payments Initiative, EPI, which aims at creating a unified payment solution across Europe. It seeks to replace national schemes for cards, online and mobile payments with unified card and digital wallet that can be used across Europe. The EPI has the ambition to become the new standard for payments for European consumers and merchants in all types of payment transactions. We'll see if that will be a success, and I think we all need to support this initiative. And I'm already coming to the conclusion and to the end of my presentation. The girocard scheme is modern, secure, efficient, widely accepted by merchants in all market sectors and preferred by consumers. The girocard is a physical card, but also moved into smartphones. It is used for customer authentication and authorization. Cashless and contactless payment is seen as more convenient and more hygienic than cash. The younger the consumer, the higher the use of cashless payment, yet older generations tend to increasingly pay cashless as well. Almost every second person in Germany wants to pay increasingly by card or smartphone, even after the Corona crisis. Yes, thank you very much. And I am happy to hear any questions from your side. Thank you very much for following the presentation. So Bianca,
Thank you very much, Jürgen. I think it was very, very useful for our discussion because you have presented the changes between previous years, 2018-19, and this special year under the coronavirus, with a suggestion that some new behaviors will be continued in the future, and also information about this European Payments Initiative is very crucial for the future. So thanks again. And now we will move to Arne Pasche. I'm sorry, I'm not sure if it was properly spoke by me. She's the head of digital solutions of MasterCard in Central Continental Europe. He is, sorry. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Michael. And your pronunciation was almost perfect.
Yeah, I am sorry because you are men, so with full respect, yes.
No, everything's perfect. Many people struggle with it a little bit. It's a Scandinavian first name and a last name with French origins.
Okay.
That causes some problems, but that's all fine.
Okay.
So thank you very much, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Since several years now, we see that the industry, the payments industry, is experiencing a massive change due to the digitization of the financial world. This digital revolution impacts payments in general on a great scale, as it has brought in lots of new technologies, and especially new powerful market players, such as the American big techs that start to play a role in the European payment space. The COVID pandemic has served as a catalyst. So nothing started because of COVID, but COVID accelerated many of these activities and these streams that have already happened years before. Also, in addition, in an era where the geopolitical system is shifting quite dramatically, we acknowledge that governments expect to play a much stronger role in managing domestic as well as regional payment systems. So please allow me to share a couple of observations and thoughts on what is happening and what is going to happen. Let's start with the German marketplace. A recent representative study conducted by the GfK, Germany's reputable market research institute, has shown that payment habits, and Jürgen has showed it as well in his presentations, have changed quite a bit. So the study revealed that almost 2/3 of the people that have been asked stated that they're using cashless often. Also, Jürgen had this in his charts. 1/3 of those people strongly indicated that they're not going to roll back to cash. Even if the pandemic crisis succeeds. This trend can be observed pretty much across all generations, not just the younger ones, even though the younger ones tend to use electronic payments slightly more often than the older generations. But one thing came out of that study that struck me the most is that an amazing 90% of all people believe that card payments should be basically accepted everywhere in all stores, which is, especially in Germany, not the case. Those study results are well reflected in the real world. As Jürgen has shown, cashless payments have for the first time outgrown cash payments in physical retail in Germany for the first time in decades. And especially contactless payments saw a massive surge and became the #1 cashless payment method in all stationary retail. So in the MasterCard world, contactless payments equate, depending on the country, between 60 and 80% of all transactions today. And as I said before, all research indicates that consumers will likely not roll back their change in behavior. So digitization is on, we call it a back burner in the market. A similar development can obviously be observed across all EU member states. In a recent study that we conducted as MasterCard, it was found that nearly half of all people asked across the European region admit that they have decreased their cash usage during the pandemic. And policymakers will need to take these developments into account when implementing rules or drafting new policy. A practical example is the current debate around payments for the charging of electrical vehicles. Customer-friendly open-loop solutions must be found on a pan-European level to foster acceptance and adoption by the consumers in the fight to reduce CO2 emission. I had to encounter it by myself when I replaced my previous car with an all-electric vehicle a couple of months ago, and I was confronted with a confusing maze of multiple non-interoperable charging solutions. It was really, excuse my harsh words, it was a mess. To find a place where you can load and find a way how to pay for loading your car. Let me reiterate another point that I made earlier. There's a strong demand for consumers to pay electronically and contactless. There is no doubt about it. However, the challenge for consumers, and that's especially true in Germany, is that quite often there are lots of places where consumers cannot pay cashlessly, where cash is still king, which especially in times of these pandemic are really non-comprehensible to many, many people. So the point I would like to make is give freedom of choice to the consumer, or in other words, all point of sales should allow consumers to have the option to pay cashless. The benefits are obvious to all of us. Consumer choice and convenience, especially in times where hygiene is paramount, is key. Safety and security across payments, so combating money laundering, combating the shadow economy is key for policymakers. And last but not least, it's all about innovation. So electronic payments drive new business models, and we have seen mobile wallets emerge in the European markets there. As we see the emergence of in-store e-commerce payments, where the lines between the traditional physical retail and e-commerce are blurring more and more. So take the example of going into a shop like Amazon Go, where you check in with your mobile app, you pick your goods, you leave the store, you pay with your app. Is that physical retail or is it e-commerce? The payment is certainly e-commerce, but you're in a physical store. And there are multiple examples that we use almost every day. So as customers are increasingly moving towards the adoption of electronic and contactless payments, policymakers should make the freedom of choice in payment solutions mandatory from our point of view. Now let's focus a bit on e-commerce, because e-commerce is certainly a big winner in this pandemic. It's completely touchless, so that's wonderful for all people that are concerned about their hygiene. And the shift has accelerated quite visibly during this pandemic, but not evenly. So there are some that benefited a lot, and those were primarily the big platforms, and some that are still struggle, and those are primarily the SMEs. And I guess this is what today's session is all about. What do we need to do for and with the SMEs? So e-commerce has become an important factor for SME retailers to secure their revenues despite the impact of the virus. Shoppers usually also appreciate, and that's what a recent study that MasterCard conducted in multiple European countries found out, is that shoppers appreciate the opportunity to continue shopping at their smaller local retailers to support also their local business, and there may be other connections to these local players. So it is important. And at MasterCard, we continue to support especially the SME ecosystem by offering innovative payment solutions and secure payment solutions to allow their business going. And as we all know, trust is key in the online space. And especially when it comes to SMEs, as they usually are unknown to a broad range of people because they don't have big brands, trust is paramount to get the business going. So the introduction of PSD2 and its strong customer authentication builds that trust when it comes to payments, at least between retailers and consumers, because consumers are supposed to feel safe when making a payment. And as a consequence of this, merchants and the issuing, the banking community, have already made significant effort towards the implementation of strong customer authentication, or SCA as it's called. However, we still see a large number of retailers, especially SMEs, that are unfortunately unlikely to achieve full compliance with the demands of SCA after the end of the implementation deadline on January 1st. Two reasons for that: technical complexity. Let's not forget, the introduction of SCA is a massive infrastructure change across Europe with multiple entities. So it's all banks, it's all acquirers, it's all merchants that need to do something to implement that protocol. And at the end, this is all infrastructure. At the end, consumers need to follow. Consumers need to understand what is happening and why it's good for them. And that is usually a process that takes time, the adoption of a new behavior. And also SMEs, especially, as I said, the smaller ones, they don't have plenty of resource. They are currently fighting to mitigate the impacts of the pandemic. They don't have big departments of people that can figure out how SCA works best in their environment and what they need to do. So it is very difficult for them. In this environment, we as MasterCard, we try to provide heavy hands-on support in all markets, and also financial support for the majority of industry players to meet the demands of SCA. But we must acknowledge, as an entire market, as an industry, that additional measures may be required to allow for smooth transition. Otherwise, we may lose the consumers, as I said before, because they don't understand what's happening, and we may lose lots of SME retailers in that process. So hence, NCAs should retain the flexibility to enforce SCA gradually. This is necessary to ensure business continuity on January 1st, which, by the way, is in the middle of a technical freeze period of the Christmas business. So there's not a single retailer in Europe that will change anything on their system on January 1st. That's a holiday, nobody's there, and it's a technical freeze, right? In the most important sales season of the year, which is the Christmas period, nobody wants to touch the technical infrastructure, especially when no one is around to do so. So we are aware that several EU member states are considering, or have already communicated, the adoption of ramp-up plans, granting gradual flexibility beyond January 21st. And those ramp-up plans should ideally be aligned across the EU member states to maintain the integrity of a unified European market. So to avoid situations like when the pandemic hit, where all European markets out of a sudden took their complete own decisions not aligned with the other states, that is something that we should best avoid in the payment space. Ultimately, we have to ensure that consumers can conclude their transactions at all merchants. The undesirable alternatives would be that consumers potentially move away from strong customer authentication towards less secure payment options, which are still out there, let's face it. Or they push away from the European SMEs towards the already dominant and large e-commerce platforms who have the staff and who have the resource and have already implemented all SCA requirements, which the SMEs didn't have the chance to do. Therefore, it is important that policies take the current challenges into account that many SME retailers face during these unprecedented times. Domestic and/or pan-European ramp-up plans can be a relevant measure from our point of view to avoid a disruption in European e-commerce. In any case, I would like to stress that MasterCard will continue to engage with all market players, including regulatory authorities, to ensure the best and smoothest transition to the new requirements. So thank you very much for having me this morning, and I give it back to you, Michael.
Okay, thank you very much, Arne. I think it was very fruitful because on the one hand, you have presented some expectations visible from consumer side, which is also very important, that all those solutions will be friendly for them and secure. But on the other hand, this is the assessment. It was an assessment if small, medium businesses are prepared to this. Yes, of course, here the commerce developed during the pandemic time, but on the other hand, small, medium businesses very often have to survive under the circumstances created, established by pandemic. So your suggestion that we need to focus on operational issues and make those issues much more European, not only addressed to one country, not only addressed to some groups, some retailer chains and so on. It's very, very important, and I think we will continue this discussion. Thank you very much again. And now we can ask representatives of some institutions, and it's important what the European Commission is going on at that time. We have this Payment Services Directive, PSD2. We have this report prepared by Andrzej Kowarik and Stefan Berger, and what will be in the future, what are the next steps will be proposed by Commission. A very broad presentation of European Commission strategy for the next years. I think it's very important for our discussion because we started with presentation of the European Parliament report. We have had presentations done by, if I can say, operators, and this is very important to know what the European Commission is planning for the future. Before I will move to the next speaker, I want to ask you, all speakers, to look at the chat, because there are some questions and points raised by Peter Robinson. So at the end, probably, I'm not sure if we will have time, but look at it, and if it will be possible, we will try to respond to him. Now, I want to give the floor to Marcin Nowacki, Vice President of Union of Entrepreneurs and Employers from Poland, and it will be excellent, yes, to meet the opinion of representatives of small, medium businesses organization and have the view on what operators and public institutions as European Commission were presented at the Chara. So Marcin, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. First of all, let me share with some of the some paradoxes and phenomenon from Poland these days. On the one hand, of course, because of the pandemic situation, the number of electronic transactions and non-cash payments has increased significantly. Of course, this is due to the security issues and guidelines of government and the World Health Organization not to avoid cash. On the other hand, the amount of cash in circulation withdrawn from bank accounts directly also reached record levels, like ever. Poles decided simply in times of crisis that they want to have cash with them. And just to give you an idea of this record level is that in March 2020, compared to the previous year, we had more than twice as much cash in circulation as a year before. And until October 2020, the value of cash in circulation grew by over 70 billion zloty, which is roughly about 15 billion euros. So we have two different worlds actually, and this is all due to the pandemic. The another thing very specific that is happening here is that because of the pandemic, there are less ATMs. We don't have the surcharge for ATMs here in Poland. So due to the less cash withdrawals from ATMs, because we had most of them directly from banks, and less single transactions per ATM, the industry is suffering, and we lost just throughout last quarter 460 ATMs. So just a short overview of the situation. With regards to the digital payment policies, I think that the market with the PSD2 is now really competitive and is functioning well. We are very happy as the market of acceptance that this is happening, and the market is basically more open. And I would see definitely some new efforts of the Commission to focus on further on open finance. But I wanted also to focus, that was roughly discussed today, on e-commerce. E-commerce allowed domestic and European producers to survive during the pandemic, and we basically filled the gaps in traditional sales channels by the e-commerce. From our data, we just published a report on the e-commerce market. By 2025, e-sales will account for 20% of the market. In other words, it means that who will not sell online in 5 years will lose minimum every fourth customer. In Poland only, the e-commerce market will grow by 20%. I think at the EU level, it's about 12-13%. But knowing that we are moving, the market is shifting from the traditional retail into e-commerce, we must, I believe, focus on equal rules of competition between European and especially Chinese e-commerce. Chinese companies have a number of domestic public support instruments at their disposal. And unfortunately, they make use also of the gaps in the European system in a highly non-competitive manner. I think here of bypassing our customs duties, VAT, product safety standards, and customer rights, especially with regards to warranty and possibility to return the product. This is basically not at the disposal of European customers. And understanding the growth of the e-commerce, we must somehow make sure that the European market and the European legal framework is ready for the speedy presence of non-European players in the EU. And I don't believe this is happening to the extent we really should kind of prevent and secure European players. Let me also address the two previous speakers, especially on the whether we should develop the acceptance base by force, by legal instruments, or by choice. I definitely think we need to promote it by choice. And let me share a good practice in the field of expanding cashless transactions for small businesses here in Poland. We have the cashless Poland program offering a free payment terminal for a period of 12 months. And from our surveys and research, that was the fixed cost of renting a terminal. That was a limitation for micro and small companies to enter the market of non-cash payments. And it works really well. The card acceptance network in Poland has never grown so fast. Thanks to the program, we got 200,000 new companies accepting cashless payments. And this is a perfect example that this is not, we should not impose on entrepreneurs the obligation to accept payment cards. It is the market and the market environment that should encourage card acceptance through competitive tools, low costs, and of course awareness of the benefits associated with the card acceptance. So definitely, I agree with the previous speaker that we need to promote choice and also respect the cash that is in circulation in Poland and other European countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marcin, for your contribution to the discussion and also putting the perspective for e-commerce development, yes, because I think it will be crucial, and also this very strong message addressed to all of us and to the situation that we need to prefer the model with choices. Those new solutions shouldn't be implemented by force. I fully agree, because at the end, at last, we have consumers, and we depend on consumers' behaviors. Yes? So it is very important to adjust to them and to adjust to their expectations. Thank you very much for all those questions. Thank you, Jürgen Gobel, for your response addressed to Peter Robinson. If somebody of the panelists, of the speakers, want to react on some questions put by Peter Robinson, please, I want to ask you as speakers. Jürgen presented his, yes, please.
The attendees cannot read the questions, so if you can reference the questions
because
while
we
answering.
have, you know, I have asked all panelists to look at chat. Yes, we have 8 minutes to the end.
Yeah.
But okay, please read, so it will be easier to consider. Please read.
So Peter Robinson from Liberty Consulting said that while there is no doubt that card volumes have increased since the start of the pandemic, in a normally competitive market, such increases would equate to a reduction in costs. However, merchants are not seeing lower costs of card acceptance, and the cost seems to be increasing. There's any.
Okay, if somebody want to react, to respond, Arne or Jürgen again, please consider.
Yeah, I'm happy to
yes, please.
From our end. So in principle, the statement is fair. The pricing for card acceptance is determined by the pricing of the acquirer entities in the various markets, which we have no influence over. So it is something that, as in a good business, basically merchants should discuss with their contractual partner, meaning the acquirer, whether a different price would be appropriate under the given circumstances. So it's very difficult to make a general statement about this, given that this is, again, a contractual relationship between a merchant and an acquiring entity, which is driven, to our understanding, by multiple parameters, not just the volume, but also the risk and whatever else is involved in the transaction between those entities.
From my side, as I mentioned at the beginning, we are focusing on card present payments, so do not include e-commerce today, so I cannot comment too much. But what I see is that, of course, e-commerce payment is very much dominated by international players and their payment systems. So the share of local or domestic or European schemes is quite limited today.
Yeah,
if
thank
I can,
you. Yeah, please, Martin, please.
Yeah, again, answering this this question or remark, actually, I would like to refer to the case study here from Poland and the cashless program that is financed by funds paid by stakeholders. These are banks issuing cards, acquirers, and card organizations, and they are paying. They are actually contributing to the program in order to offer the terminals for 12 months for free to micro and small companies. And this is a way to perhaps we can copy it on other markets in order to somehow meet the challenge and the expectations from small businesses in other markets.
Thank you very much. As we can see, many works were done at that area, cashless payment, especially during the COVID time. But of course, there are many challenges before us as building the trust, building the operational resilience, which is important when we are looking at the cyber threats all over the world, also in the European Union. It is important to prefer and develop this pro-choice model. I think it's crucial. But on the other hand, we need to make much more interoperable solutions in the European Union, some harmonization in some solutions, and also e-identification, because it's crucial not only for the cashless payments, but in many areas. Now, thank you very much to all of you for the very fruitful debate. Now I want to ask Stefan Berger, member of the European Parliament, to make wrap up to summarize our discussion. Stefan, please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. For me, it's my honor to draw conclusions of today's discussions, and let me first start with a comment. I'm a big fan of cash payment, because cash is the other side of the medal for individual freedom. But as everybody described this morning, we see it's not about the COVID pandemic. It's a general thing that it's going more and more to cashless payment. And I think here is a common sense that if we as players in the field, as politicians or card companies or the Commission, that we have to answer this changing, and we have to develop a framework that is able to solve the most important question. The first thing is interoperability. The Commission has released the DORA thing, and I think Andrej Kovarik and we worked on these questions very deep. This is one of the most important basics to develop an interoperable market for cashless payments. The second thing is that we have to develop solutions for the small and medium enterprises, as everybody of you described, because everybody knows that even in Germany it's very hard to pay cashless, yeah. And in Denmark you can pay everywhere and every little shop cashless, but in Germany it's not everywhere usual. And these are the questions we have to solve. But then it's going on further. We are on the point we debate the credit card. We are debating the cash card. For me, I live in Germany, and I pay what Jürgen Goebel described. I pay with my Sparkassen card, yeah, or I pay with my Sparkassen card. I have a Mastercard, yeah. But the next step is paying with crypto assets, and I have the big honor to be the rapporteur of the MiCA report, Markets in Crypto Assets. I think Unrecovery will be the shadow. I hope so. I hope so. Yeah. And the next thing is, okay, everybody knows if you compare now crypto assets, we have only 200 billions in Bitcoins. This is not very much, because if you maybe compare it with the M1 of the euro, it's about 7 trillions. But a lot of companies are on the point that they want to develop their own currency, like Libra for Facebook or something. And when this development will start, then the whole payment process will change. And the aim of these new initiatives is to put the money away from the banks, put the money away from the credit card companies, and put the money directly to companies like Facebook or something. We cannot completely avoid this this development, because in the world, Chinese companies are starting with their own stable coins. So, and now we are at the point to start the regulation for this new world. And I think this is we are on a very serious point in this discussion, because these stable coins did not exist at this time, but in future they will be very, very important, and you can cheaply send money across borders as quickly as text messages. You can use this with a wallet, yeah, with one finger, yeah, and then we open maybe not the Pandora wallet, yeah. So, yeah. So this is the next discussion we will have in the Econ committee, with a very hard or a very interesting report, the market and crypto assets, and that's the next thing. So for me, it was a very interesting debate, showing clearly that we all know that the European society will change in more or less paying cashless, and that the political institution have to build an answer that the European banking family, the European credit card family, and the European SMEs can cope with the situation and make their business in future too. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stefan, for your wrap up of our discussion. And I think that the general message today in online discussion is we need to make the cash much more secure and much more inclusive for all people, but with a choice. Secure, it means with all solutions which are important for operators and for businesses to make those transactions secure in the era of cyber threats. Thank you very much to all of you. And I think that at the end, our discussion, and also Stephen summarizing our discussion, open many topics which should be discussed in the future. So this is the question to the SME Connect, how in the relatively short time to organize the next discussion, taking into account what is going on in the Parliament due to activities of our excellent member of the European Parliament, Andrzej Kowalik and Stefan Berger. Thank you very much to all of you and have a good day.